I hope my mic is picking up the sound of the bugs. There's the sound of the spring branch, and there's cicadas this time of year, and it's really lovely. Okay. The end of trying to get there. The end of trying to wake up. The end of seeking. The end of efforting. That's what I want to talk about in this video. There's so many layers to that. At least there's been so many layers of that for me. And it's like every time a new layer is seen, it's like more and more subtle. It's like a subtler layer to trying to get there. I guess another way of saying that would be trying to escape just what's happening, trying to get away from what's happening. Trying to, not trying, but just the habit of turning away from experience and jumping into thought. I want to weave in another topic into that, so I'm going to kind of touch on both. But I was talking to a friend recently about how the big bang of recognizing the truth of what you are, recognizing your true nature, recognizing yourself as emptiness, recognizing yourself as silence, like it's the I am presence. Like that recognition is really just the start of all of this. It's really just the beginning. That's stream entry, as it's called in some traditions. I don't know if that's Buddhism, but or Zen Buddhism, I'm not sure. It's appropriate that I'm talking about stream entry, literally sitting in the middle of a stream. So I kind of want to talk about both of those. So I was talking to a friend about this, and just, I guess the subtlety, really what the conversation was about was like the subtlety of bypassing, like how subtle the tendency is to bypass. And there has to be such like an immense self-honesty, and it's so humbling. Like every time there's like an opening to a new layer of just being honest with oneself, it's so humbling. Like I have been knocked down so far, humbled so deeply. It's this constant reminder that like I don't know anything. Nothing is known. Absolutely nothing. Even the knowing I am, in a way, is fading. The knowing here. Like it was embodied, but then there's this way that it gets taken on as a concept. It's like, oh yeah, of course I know that. But I guess I'll start with the end of trying to get there, trying to get anywhere. The end of trying to wake up, the end of trying to become enlightened, the end of seeking, the end of trying to get away from this moment, from anything in life. Just like such a deep embrace. So that opening into the recognition of, you know, beingness, silence, emptiness. Like I use so many words in these videos, and I find that I always say a lot of different words because it's so easy for the mind to just like grasp onto one and turn it into a concept. But there's so many ways that people talk about this. There's so many non-duality teachers that point directly to the being. And I understand why, but that's only the opening of this. That's only the start of this. It goes so much deeper. If there really, truly is the earnestness and the willingness to just keep letting go, to wanting to not only see what you are, but to live it, to be it. To like manifest as it in every single moment. It's not possible not to do that, but it's to know that through and through. And I guess recently I found, it's just humbled again. Just found like yet another really subtle way that I was trying to get somewhere. And it wasn't even like someplace far in the future. It was just like trying to reach a state. Or like trying to have a certain experience. And in doing so, like subtly bypassing the current experience. The current experience is the only experience there is. It's like trying to create an experience, like so subtly. But there's just this thing like really coming online in my life of just like pump the brakes, like slow down. You can't control this. You cannot control this. Just like there's these tendencies in life to want to like get to the place where I finally have the thing, where I finally have the job, where I finally have the partner, where I finally have the life that I want, where I finally have the vocation. And like there can be, like I've done so much of this, there can be this like obsession with like what life will be like when I'm there. But there's such a subtle bypass in that. Not even really subtle, it's a pretty obvious bypass. There's a bypass in that. And there's an orientation to time in that. But if, like, what I'm noticing is that there's, I guess you could, this is just one way to say this, but there's like a feminine and a masculine aspect of the whole of every moment. And the masculine aspect is much more, I don't know, I guess there's different ways, like you could say this in both ways, but to me the masculine aspect is much more like, here it is. But there's also a, like you really have to like, I've had to really slow down. Slow. And that's where meditation is so helpful, like slowing it down to let those more subtle and like not so dominant facets of the moment like really surface, really come to the surface and like be known and seen, and all the minutia. And that's where like emotion work really comes in and can be so powerful. Especially if you're someone like me who has, like, the conditioning here is so habituated to orient to everything else, to orient to sight, to sound, to, you know, for me, and like energetics is a big one, orienting to like the energy of the environment. And like that is so predominant that like those subtle layers of like sensing the body get dulled or like numbed, or have gotten that way. And so it really takes like slowing down, pumping the brakes, and to just let yourself sink into just what is happening right now without trying to get away from it. Like just for a moment is enough to like free something that's hooked, is enough to free an energy that's being looped in. Just to slow down enough to like, in what I was talking about with my friend recently, and this is where this ties in, is, you know, I hear a lot of talk about like, I think there's maybe a misconception that like the realization of what you are, like the realization of presence as what you are is like it. But there's like so much more investigation that can happen if you're willing, if there's a willingness and like an interest. That's not to say that there needs to be. But I hear like it feels like there's a lot of, the way that a lot of people talk about this stuff is that that's it. That's the end of the road. You're done. But there's still suffering that arises in experience after that recognition. Like the habit to get looped into thought doesn't just dissolve after you've seen that. There's like an unhooking or like a combing out of all of those knots, all of those entanglements that has to happen. Or that can happen. It's not to say it has to. And so if there's a willingness to be so honest with oneself about like the suffering that's present, or a curiosity about thoughts that are looping. Maybe there's thoughts that are looping. To me, I can't say that thoughts completely evaporate, but it's like when they really unhook, and it takes time for that, like when thought is like rooted in the body. Like the way that I think about this is like, thought is almost like the leaves of a plant. That's like the leaves of a plant. But then there's this like stalk. If you follow a thought down, there's this stalk that grows out of the earth, and then there's this root under the surface, and the root is like, so thoughts have like a tether into the habit, into the way of being, you can call it into the body. And there's a root. And so if you're willing to be curious and not just say like, that thought's not true, because that's a bypass to say, well, I know that thought's not true, I know that's not what I am. But if something is looping and there's a hook, or there's suffering in the experience, there's an opportunity there. So a thought is like a manifestation of a belief that's like rooted energetically in the system. And so there's an opportunity to follow that down And once the root is pulled up, those thoughts don't hook anymore. And oftentimes they don't even occur. For me, I've noticed like they just don't even occur anymore. But I mean, I guess if I'm being honest, I can't say that they don't occur at all. There's no stickiness to it. So it's like if they do occur, there's literally not even a noticing of it. Like there's no noticing if they do occur. It's just completely in the background if they do, but just to say that that's not true is a bypass, because there's still habits, like conditioned ways of being that are so habituated, that are kind of blocking the living of that initial realization. And often like thought is a way to turn away from experience in some way. Like there's if you notice that you're getting hooked in a thought, there's a way that experience is being turned away from and thought is being oriented to. So if you can be curious about that, like what about this experience right now is uncomfortable? Like what's the habit that has been created that like, how is thought being used to turn away from experience? Like it's a habit that's been cultivated. And if you can follow that down and turn back to experience, turn back to oftentimes, or at least what I've found for myself, is sensation. Back to just the raw sensation of the experience. That's when things get really interesting. That's when those roots can be shaken from the ground and pulled up, and then the thoughts don't even come. The thoughts don't come anymore, or they're not paid attention to. Like I'm going to say that they don't come because if they do come, they're so subtle that they're not noticed. So the end of trying to get there, the end of trying to wake up, is the end of turning away from experience. There's so many layers to that. I found that has kind of followed like the chakras in the body, you know, or the energy centers, however you want to look at that. It's like, okay, what experience here is being turned away from? What sensation here, like what wants to be said that's not being said? What's being turned away from by getting looped in thought? What's being turned away from here? What emotion, what grief, what sadness, what anger is being turned away from? And then it goes down here, like what way of being, like that would be authentic, is being turned away from by getting wrapped in thought. And then it drops. What, I guess below that would be more like creativity, what, or just like life force, what, maybe that would be more energetic. What energetic stamp is being turned away from? And then below that, like what fear? But it's all just like ways of, just different ways that experience is turned away from. That's all this is. Waking up is the end of turning away from experience. Not my experience, not my beliefs about the experience that I'm having, not what I want experience to be. It's like the actual rawness of what is happening right now in the senses, the visuals, the sounds, the smells, the taste, the sensation, and even the thought. If thought is being turned away from, That's a bypass. If you're just saying that thought's not true, I know that thought's not true, that thought isn't the truth of what I am, that's a bypass. And there's a time for that in the transcendent stage. There's a time to realize that those thoughts aren't what you are, but then if you're continuing to turn away from it rather than turn towards it and find the richness, like find the fruit in that, because there is rich fruit in that. That's the embodiment of this. That's much more confronting than emptiness. So that's turning back towards experience, all the experience that you've been avoiding. All the ways that there have been habits built up and coping mechanisms built to avoid experience. Because there's beliefs and, there's like traumas that have been experienced or, very real ways that, there's been wounding. And so there have been coping mechanisms just very innocently built up to turn away from experience. And the embodiment is starting to turn back towards experience. And that's where all of, oftentimes trauma work really comes in. And the difference is it's not, like I think in a lot of non-duality circles, like that kind of stuff is really like trauma work, like you just realize that you're nothing and nobody and there's no doer, so who could possibly do that kind of work? Like that's a fucking bypass. Total bypass. I know that from experience. I've done all the bypassing. I'm sure there's still, subtle ways that there's turning away that'll have to be confronted, but like there's so much humility in having to be honest with yourself that like, yeah, I'm fucking bypassing, and having to acknowledge that and then turn back towards experience, the experience that's being bypassed. But that's where trauma work comes in, but the difference is that it's not trying to make yourself better. You're not trying to shine yourself, make yourself better, make yourself a better person, because there truly is no doer, but it's not somebody doing trauma work. It's just trauma work to unhook conditioning. But there's not somebody doing it. There's not somebody doing the experiencing. There's just the experiencing. Just the experience. Just turning back towards experience. But seeing that there's not someone doing it. Letting go of control that deeply. It's a process of coming to see and know experience as empty by turning back towards it. But you have to turn back towards it in order to see that. You can't just know it conceptually, or you can know it conceptually, but you're not going to be able to live this realization if you don't turn back towards experience to come to know every experience as empty. And that's a process of like being humbled by life, being humbled by experience in life. Every experience in life is for your liberation. Every experience in life is an opportunity to turn towards experience in order to come to know that experience as empty. And there's probably going to be blocks to move through, and emotions to move through, and bypasses to move through, and thoughts that need to be uprooted. So the end of trying to get there is an abiding turning towards experience. It's the end of bypassing. It's the end of bypassing. The end of turning away from experience. And there might still be like little moments of turning away, but then it's caught. And there's a moving back towards it. It's doing, untying, how do I say this? Undoing, unlearning the habit to turn away from experience. That's what it is. And so that's what practices are for. Practices can be helpful in that, because turning away from experience is such a deeply ingrained habit that to turn back towards experience requires practices to help those habits be broken down. So meditation is a great one, somatic practices, yoga, psychedelics can be really helpful. Working with a therapist or, somebody who teaches these things or whatever, those can all be very helpful. Okay, that feels like a good length to me. I guess as I wrap this up, I'll just say that, if anything in this has struck something in you, or there's a curiosity in you, or you're feeling like you're maybe could use some support to, if you don't know what that looks like, to start to turn back towards experience, it can be helpful to have support. I'm not saying that you will need it. Not everybody needs it. I needed a lot of it. And still do from time to time. But if something like that calls to you, like I do offer one-on-one sessions. You can book it. There's links in the video description to book a session. So yeah, if that's something that you feel drawn towards, if you're feeling like there's something else here, but you're not quite sure where to start, support can be helpful. So let's just take a moment together to just listen to the nature sounds. You can close your eyes if you want. Feel your body. Feel the sensation of whatever you happen to be sitting on, or if you're standing, feel your feet on the floor. You can even sense into the boundary of your skin. And then tune into the sounds. Be well, friends.